Warden. This is the Women's International News Gathering Service.
You're with Arrow FM 92.7, brought to you in association with New Zealand On Air. That was a really hard word to remember.
That we of the West have forgotten.
Good afternoon and welcome to The Road to Recovery, The Road to Freedom with Mark. This is my 30-minute show, 28 minutes that I do every Friday, and yes indeed it is Friday afternoon in August and the beginning of spring. So great to be alive at times like this where we're seeing lambs born and seeing the world change. It's quite something, it really is. And you know, people have been rocked recently by this recent outbreak of COVID-19, and it's going to affect us all badly. Now, for those of you who don't know my show is about mental health, about the issues to do with mental health, right? And what I've found, because I've suffered from mental illness most of my life, I've come across ways of handling things, of dealing with issues, and I realise when you have some difficulty and drama in your life, it can often be quite paralysing and makes life extraordinarily difficult, not just for you but those around you. And there is no doubt that this latest outbreak, this pandemic, is going to cause tremendous problems in society. We are going to find that there's going to be a lot more depression in society. A lot more people are going to struggle, and the reason for this is many people are going to be facing an uncertain future full of worry and struggle. For the first time in their lives, many people are going to be faced with having to be on the benefit long term for the very first time in their lives, and they will struggle. Everyone will be fighting for the same jobs, hundreds and hundreds of people for every job, perhaps thousands. And we are not ready for this. We are not prepared in any way. Our government, our society, our people have never been ready, and I have been trying my hardest to help people get prepared. Now it's too late. All I can really do is try to help people learn from this and learn to bail and how to bail, okay, and keep yourself afloat. The first thing is to be mindful, to be kinder with yourself. Don't blame yourself, because this is what tends to happen. You beat yourself up. You feel that you are somehow inferior because this has happened to you, that you've done something wrong. Often victims of trouble feel this way, this guilt and blame, and it is not easy to let that go. But if you are aware of it, if you are conscious of it, then you can do something about it and realise that your life is going to change, and the best thing to do is to try and garner some positive out of it. And the way you do that is to say, well, look, I'm going to try to do some things in my life that make me feel positive in some way, that I can move forward with my life, do some things I always wanted to do, perhaps completely change my career into something that either A, I love, or B, where there is demand, because there is certainly demand in certain areas. Jobs that Kiwis in the past were not prepared, not willing to do, and so we got foreigners in to do the jobs. For example, fruit picking and gathering honey and stuff like that. Tough, hard jobs. I know because I've done them. I've done fruit picking myself down in Motueka. I know how tough it is, and I know how good it is. To do a physical job like that, it's extremely rewarding, working together in a massive team of people who are all working to get that crop in, to maximise the profits for the people that we're working for, to give a good, honest, hard day's work, to be physically fit, and at the end of it, to sit back and have a nice cold beer with your fellow pickers, your workers, your mates. It can be an extremely rewarding job, especially for a young person who doesn't necessarily have to think about building a career. You know, unfortunately, we've taught our children to be so regimented that if they don't follow the lines of their career, then they are failures. And we need to change that way of thinking and realise that right now it's all hands to the pump in New Zealand. Okay, we all need to work together and look after each other. It's imperative now far more than ever before that we stick together as a people and support each other, especially those suffering from mental health issues. Those people are going to suffer. They are going to struggle. There is a good chance that we are heading into a recession well, we're definitely in a recession, but possibly even a depression, possibly even a worldwide depression. Probably not on the scale of the late 20s or early 30s, but it will be a severe retraction which will take years to change. People are not going to be willing to fly into planes with pressurised cabins with no air scrubbers, not for years. So tourism is going to be dramatically affected in New Zealand significantly, and we need to get innovative. We need to use our brains to find other ways than the easy way we had before, where we just cattle truck them on and cattle truck them off. That is not going to happen, not for years. And many businesses will fail, but what you've got to realise, of course, is that other businesses will take their place in time. The most important thing is that we ride out this storm together. We have plenty of food. It's a good country, a great society, but as you've seen in Australia, when push comes to shove, everyone goes nuts and starts stripping the shelves of food in the supermarkets, and that must not happen. We need to learn not to panic and be selfish and grab and be greedy and ignore everybody else. When things are really, really, really tough, that is the time you need to show kindness and consideration. When it's hard to do those things, not when it's easy, not when you're fat and rich and happy. It's easy to be charitable then to sprinkle a few crumbs, but when things are really tough like now, this is the time when it really counts, when it really matters. Anything and everything that you can do to help people who are struggling in this next 2 years is going to make all the difference. And, you know, it's great to see society turning around and mental health becoming a big issue. Thanks to people like John Kirwan and Mike King, the profile has been lifted, money has been raised, the government is starting to listen to people, and we are starting to address some of these situations where we can make our people, all of our people, happier and healthier. Just one thing. We think that this is a crisis. This is normal. If you look at last century, from beginning to end, we came through the Boer War, then the Boxer Rebellion, where millions and millions and millions of Chinese people died because of opium addiction, which, of course, the Americans profited from and built their first city as a result of those millions of addicts dying. That is historical fact, not my opinion. After the Boxer Rebellion and the end of the Boer War, there was of course, the First World War, which started in 1913, not even a decade after the end of the Boer War, where we had our first concentration camps. The war to end all wars completely destroyed society, ended the Victorian Empire, wasted an entire generation, and on the back of that we had an outbreak of influenza. It was called the Spanish flu, but it was just a variation of influenza. That killed 50 to 100 million. Now, to put that into perspective, we've lost 500,000 so far to COVID, right? That's 100 times as many died after World War II, and we were less interconnected. People were more independent and able to look after themselves in those days. They grew their own food. We don't now. We are utterly reliant. So should anything like that strike us again, far more virulent, far worse, you can imagine how society will disintegrate. So we need to learn the lessons now. Now, of course, after the Spanish flu epidemic, we had a little bit of a break during the Roaring Twenties where everything came right. And then, of course, we had the Wall Street crash at the end of the 20s into the 30s. Michael Joseph Savage government in New Zealand started building railway tracks. Government gave people jobs, council housing, all of that stuff happened in the worst of times. Then, of course, we come out of the 30s, end of the 30s, World War II breaks out, right through to the mid-40s. That finishes, we go on to Korea, Vietnam, and the Cold War through the 80s, until the end of the 80s when the Communist Empire finally collapses. Then we go on to Desert Storm, Afghanistan, and all that horrible nonsense. So basically, the entire last century, was full of war and disease and famine. And the point that I make is that this is normal. This is how the world is. Pain, suffering, disease, wars. If you study history, the further back you go, the more you realise the plague, influenza, cholera are wiping out millions every day in the world, and always have been and always will be. So we need to change our focus and don't think that safe and easy as she goes is normal. Life always will be a struggle, and as long as we work together, we'll get through it. But now more than ever, we need to support each other. Right, it's my little rant. I'm going to try and crack through the story. I don't just talk about mental health. I read stories from my travels around the world and my adventures in New Zealand. Just to emphasise that because you have mental illness doesn't mean it necessarily has to be completely debilitating. You can get on with life. And this is one of my stories from getting on with life. This is called Pieces of Silver. The old mate woke me about 4:30 a.m. one morning in spring. I was staying in a large caravan out the back of his place. We were in the middle of fishing for groper and had a few more tons to land. Sorry about the phone ringing there. Just one of those things that happens. Idiots ring me up. I ask them not to, and I don't know how to switch off my new stupid phone, so I'm sorry about that ringing, but there we go. She's over now. Right, let's rock on. We were in the middle of fishing for groper and had a few more tons to land. I sprung out of bed as I knew we had a big day ahead of us. Work clothes were hurriedly put on as I stumbled into the darkness towards the flat deck ute. We headed up to the refrigerated container that held boxes of bait and took 6 for the day's fishing. Then we loaded up 140 litres of diesel and headed down to the boat. It was still dark when we arrived and filled the tanks and stowed the gear. I put on my all-weather overalls and started cutting baits. Barracuda frozen whole is easy as filtered solid, but it freezes the hands fast. Despite the numbness and the razor-sharp blade, I worked as fast as I could go. We needed 300 baits of curder and squid prepared before we reached the fishing grounds. It would take my best efforts to be ready on time, and the old mate would not accept any excuses. Right on the first hint of light, Tora drove over on his quad bike, ready to back the boat down, using a large metal cradle and a D9 Caterpillar bulldozer. Beach launches are never easy, but old Tora backs us into the water with a great puff of black smoke and some consummate skill. Tom kicks over the 2 D4 Caterpillar engines, and the old skipper on board hears them bark into life on demand. He listens carefully as he warms the motors up for any hint of problem, which must be addressed before we head out. With nothing obviously untoward, he engages the twin Hamilton jets they drive and swings us around to face the ocean. Tom goes through the motions of checking the gear, first the electronics, then a knowing eye over the hauling gear, and finally over me, flat out cutting baits, and the hauling gear, and finally over the hundreds of traces that we will be sending down to the bottom in a few hours. Happy that all is in order. The skipper opens up the motors and puts on some Johnny Cash as he plots a path down to the fishing grounds. I feel the bow rise to the challenge and try to move in rhythm with her so as not to slice my hands, now rather numb. The sun is rising magnificently today, and it lights up the gnarly coastal cliffs, all orange, red and blue, with wisps of mist still licking the gullies. But we have only minutes to take in the view before it's back to toil. For after cutting a few hundred baits, the traces must be baited and laid up, ready for later. We lose no time as the engines roar on and the jets push us along at a good 30 knots. I battle on and check the main lines, floats, anchors, clips, traces and ropes in sequence exactly how the skipper showed me. Everything must run like clockwork, or it could cost us in gear or injury or even our lives, and this is the most dangerous occupation there is. Out here our roles have very much changed, and it is important we function as a unit. Tom becomes the skipper and must make decisions quickly and without impedance. I must follow on orders with understanding and as quickly as possible. No hesitation or misunderstanding can be tolerated, or the consequences could be dire for us both. At times this necessity tests both patience and friendship, but we approach it from the angle of understanding so we can work safely and quickly together. The hours pass so quickly that I scarcely have time to have all ready as we arrive on the grounds we call the holes. We have coincided our arrival with the turning of the tide, a time when countless billions of plankton rise from the depths of night time to photosynthesize during the morning. They turn the sea a beautiful green with their vast numbers and fill our hearts with expectation. The timing of our arrival is crucial, and the tides here are erratic, influenced by more subtle forces than the moon alone. Old skippers now long gone have taught Tom the secrets of this place decades ago, when the Italians and the Greeks fished these places. Now that they're gone, my skipper is one of the last with the knowledge, which is the crucial difference between success and failure. We cannot see the plankton on the fish-finding gear, the electronics being turned back a bit, but what preys on them is clearly evident. With jaw-dropping clarity, we see 15 to 25 metres deep of an uncountable swarm of tiny fish of many different species, following up and feeding on the tiny plankton. Most of these fish are never seen by humans, and much of their lives remains a mystery, as this is a truly wild and far-flung corner of the world. What feed on them is our glittering prize, our pieces of silver. Groper are our target species today, fishing in a depth of approximately 250 metres. Above them are bluenose and below bass, but groper is what we're truly after. 100 fish for the day is our unspoken rule for a really good day, but they are few and far between. Today looks especially good. The skipper snoops around with the electronic gear, cruising slowly over the holes, and there is promise everywhere. We must have our baits in exactly the right place and depth to get amongst the prize, so we must sum up our line of attack before we move. Sorry about that. I'm afraid some clown just keeps ringing me and putting me off terribly, but never mind. I just seem to have misplaced my papers, so please bear with me. Oh crikey, there they go, I've dropped them. Sorry about that. In my rush to turn that horrible phone off, I managed to drop my papers. Such is life, this happens. We'll just have to crack on. Please bear with me. Right. Much of their life remains a mystery, as this is a truly wild and far-flung corner of the world. During this time, the most incredible transition begins to take place. Until now, we have been tracked by the great Royal Albatross. They have been soaring majestically high up on the thermals, watching and waiting patiently. Now as we slowly descend with anticipation of an ensuing feast, and they are only the first wave. Other albatross and mollymawks are similar but smaller animal arrive on the scene. Half a dozen soon become many dozens of these magnificent masters of the sky. In turn, these attract other ocean-going birds like the painted pigeons, which swim under the water as if they were flying. Within half an hour, we already have a small city of chattering birds moving expectantly before the bait has touched the water. We come around again along the already plotted course and begin fishing in earnest. We tie the anchor or the pick to the bottom of the main line, then lower all the gear. The rope is knotted every 50 metres so we can count it out as it descends. The skipper must calculate drift as well as drop. Only the experience of many thousands of drops has taught him the right way. At first the drops speed away. Tom keeps one eye on the sonar as I count out 200 metres of rope and tie the large floats off. We move on to the next cliff face and the procedure starts again, then a third and a fourth. By the time we have finished 4 drops and stopped for a coffee, it's time to go back to the beginning and start hauling. I hook up the large floats over the davit arm and the skipper engages the hydraulic hauler. As the rope tenses, we can feel the groper wriggling on the ends. The myriad of birds seem to anticipate the action as the first few hookups come up empty. Tom unclips the traces and I remove the now used baits and throw them overboard to the noisy waiting birds. But soon we see colour and 6 beautiful silver grey groper floats to the surface, each weighing about 10 kilos. The skipper removes their heads and guts with expert great thwacks of his huge knife, and the gropers start piling in. The huge royal albatross barged away in, using their hooked beaks to tear at the large livers and other offal before it sinks down. Small groups of squabbling birds are left to pick off what they can from the albatross. The second line is more successful, and a dozen groper come up, and I am soon hard at work on my knees, flushing out blood from the carcasses with the seawater hose and cleaning off any remaining guts. I am soon covered in blood and guts, but I ignore this as it slowly turns into a good day's catch. The third line is better still, with some 20 fish landing on deck, and we increase the pace. The fish are going down the hold as quickly as I can manage, but I have trouble keeping up the pace as Tom hews and hacks at a mighty rate. At least 3 dozen albatross alone are now swabbling and gorging themselves as we resemble a city of birds on the water. The fourth line, which promises to make our day, starts to come up, then suddenly straightens and slows, then starts again. The skipper and I shoot each other worried glances as we hesitate. We stare down into the depths for answers as the first hooks come up straightened out, as if some massive fish have torn both bait and fish from the traces. A few more great tugs, and it dawns upon us that we are being robbed. We stare down into the green depths for answers, and slowly the huge black shape of a whale comes into view, plucking the groper off the hooks like a bunch of grapes. Stunned at the audacity of these creatures, we are mesmerised for a minute as we are helpless to respond. "Dirty, rotten bastards," swears the skipper under his breath as the pod of whales starts to ascend, their black and white markings coming into view. Due to their great bulk, our little hooks have no effect on them, and they are free to rob us at will. "Get the gear in as quick as you can," shouts the skipper, concerned that we might snag on a whale and lose gear. At the same time, I see another whale come up behind us. At 15 metres, it is as long as our boat, and it floats right up to the stern, almost touching the jet with its nose, as it lifts its eye out of the water to stare directly at me. "Pilot whales," informs Tom as I stare at him, as captivated by this great beast as he is with me. Then we break into action to retrieve our gear as quickly as possible. As we do so, it becomes obvious that we have been defeated in our efforts, not by the elements or our elusive prey, but by a pod of robbing whales. All 4 lines have been similarly decimated, so we are forced to retrieve our gear and pack it away as the whales hover around checking us out. They are so close we can see their eyes, and I cannot help but think there is some undeniable intelligence behind them. What should have been a successful day of at least 100 groper has suddenly been curtailed into only 38 slabs of valuable silver. We managed to retrieve all the gear safely and are forced to return home early, beaten by our curious company. We make it back to the landing by midday, and seeking solace in the fact that we have at least made wages for the day, but rue the fact it could have been so much better. We will be back there soon to try our luck again, as this is a rare meeting with these Goliaths of the deep. Still, it was an experience that will stay in our mind for years to come. Okay, well that's me for another day. Despite the interrupting phone calls, I will learn how to turn that friggin' phone off. Believe you me, this new technology is so difficult, and so many people are being left behind because there is no training, there are no prompts on the phone. If you don't have young kids around like I don't, there's just no way you can learn how to use these things. You know, I've tried going to classes, courses, to learn to use computers, and the stuff they teach you is really irrelevant. What everyone needs at their local libraries is crash courses on how to use their smartphones, because the technology is developing so fast that many people are getting left behind. Older people, poorer people, people who never learned this technology. Computers didn't exist when I went to school. There was no such thing. There was supercomputers the size of buildings that were in the States, but other than that, nothing. So, you know, entire generations of people have been left behind and really need some help in that regard. And I'm amazed that it's gone on so long and stumbled on and we do nothing about it, because doing nothing is easier than someone actually getting off their chuff and organising people. But let's hope it'll happen in the future. Well, that's me for another week. Thank you very much for tuning in. I know the TV went a bit funny today and there was phone calls and I dropped my papers. Unfortunately, this is how live shows go sometimes. You've got to roll with the punches. I hope we got through it and you enjoyed my show. I hope what I said today about looking after each other is thought-provoking and people actually make an effort to do so. Thank you to all my friends up in the beautiful Hawke's Bay, Hastings, Napier. I don't know if we get as far as Gizzy round the corner, but if you're there, good to see you all. And my great friends in the Wairarapa, I really do enjoy doing this show. With the support of Michael and Veronica over the years, you know, I would have been an anathema otherwise, an outside voice shouting in at all the others, but thanks to Wairarapa TV and Arrow Radio, Michael and Veronica, I get a say, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing and shows you what a great country this is and what great people there are around and how important community radios can be to give people an opportunity to be thought-provoking, perhaps even provocative if necessary, but to get people talking and supporting their communities, which is far, far, far more important than dancing around on TikTok. So let's make an effort to help each other if we can. That's me, over and out for another week. I won't be here next week, but the week after, I'll try and bring you something really special. Hope you enjoy my show. Please spread the good word. I love doing this show, and I like to think that I'm doing my bit to help people and we can all start these important conversations together. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Look after each other. Bye for now.
See all the beauty that surrounds you. Who came knocking at the door? Little man.